The Khipu is a knotted textile record-keeping device which comes from the Quechua word for knot. It was used during the Incan Empire from approximately 1400 to 1532 upon the Spanish conquest of Peru. Constructed from cords of cotton or camelide fiber, a Khipu comprised of a primary cord from which pendant cords or modifiers and up to 10 or 12 levels of subsidiaries were attached. Khipu were displayed and read with the primary cord stretched horizontally, allowing pendants and subsidiaries to form a curtain. Subsidiary strings represented numbers outside the main count. For example, adult male deaths occurred during the year. Their complexity was demonstrated by altering variables such as fiber, up to 24 different colors, connections, location, final twist, end treatment, length, a knot's position, spacing and type, directionality, and numerical value. Knots represented different numbers and values based on their distance from the main cord, some found representing 100,000, and different colored cords indicated the counts of different things. Preserved Khipu specimens suggest colors were chosen simply by preference. The Khipu has largely been recognized as a living artifact, which the Inca used for recording and modifying data. The American Museum of Natural History recognizes the Khipu's sophistication, representing the earliest decimal system of notation within the Western world, and understanding the concept of zero, which was signified by a space with no knot. While figure eights represented the numerical value 1, its remarkable effectiveness enabled the Incas to account for more than 500 years of history. Understanding the historical context to the Khipu is as important as for any written language. There are no direct native translations of contents expressed within Khipus unmediated by the Spanish. Therefore, our understanding of these records is derived indirectly from Spanish chroniclers and subsequent transcriptions. This is concerning because while Spain initially expressed interest and respect for the Khipu, however, as land and legal disputes arose, the Khipu became a contradictory record to their own interests. In 1533, Hernando Pizarro observed upon taking supplies from an Inca storehouse, the transaction was recorded on a knotted string device by the record keepers, who untied some of the knots which they had in the deposit section of the Khipu, and then retied them in another section of the Khipu afterwards. This balancing of the books created the initial belief of a Khipu was simply an accounting tool, and not a written language. Miguel de Este made a rather different yet important observation to Pizarro, for he observed the Inca recall memories and songs by observing and noting certain chords and knots of the Khipu. These two observations suggest the Khipu recorded at least two different types of information. The majority of Khipus recovered originate from three areas of Peru: Lima and northwards to Huacho, south to Pachacamac, Ica, and Pisco, with a notable concentration along central coastal areas for climate preservation. Akasha Khipu was found and was believed to be the house of a Khipu Kamayak, or Khipu keeper, who served the lord of the palace. Those skilled in preparing and reading Khipus were called Khipu Kamayak, who passed their skill down from father to son. This valuable skill was highly regarded, where they learned to fashion their own handcrafted Khipus. Each village, regardless of size, employed at least 4 skilled Khipu Kamayak to act as a check upon the others. Moreover, chancelleries at the provincial level deployed from 4 to 30 Khipu Kamayak who kept transcripts of each other's records on their personal Khipus. However, there is debate whether there is a prescribed or idiosyncratic Khipu signing system. A Khipu Kamayak read a Khipu through visual inspection and running his fingers rapidly over the knots rather like a braille reader. If messengers known as chasqui were delivering Khipu throughout the empire, it entails a form of encoding of data within the Khipu in a mutually understood signing system by both the sender and receiver. As Khipu were being delivered around the empire, identifiers were required to understand where and for whom to deliver. Urton and Brezine hypothesized the arrangement of 3 figure-8 knots at the beginning of the Khipu represented the place identifier. They further suggest Khipu have contrasting number qualities identifying their purpose. Arguably then, Khipu Kamayak could read and write. This ability to send messages provided the Inca Empire the means to maintain control over their vast lands evident by relays Ashasqui sending messages up to 250 kilometers in a single day or 1,500 kilometers within a week. Quipus were stored within the Panchurco archive, the first known example indicating how information moved both up and down the Inca administrative hierarchy. In 1912, Locke was the first to show the numerical significance of the knots of a quipu. Quipu Kamayak used quipus to record government revenues, quantity of raw materials distributed among laborers, quality and quantity of fabrics made from it, amount of stores paid into the royal magazines, as well as monitored birth and death rates, marriages, and those qualified to bear arms. However, a quipu was not solely used as a tallying device. Garcilaso de la Vega, a writer born in Cusco in 1539, provides the most reliable information on the quipu, for he understood and used the device. The quipu, according to Garcilaso de la Vega, was used primarily for recording numbers, 2, probably used as in memorizing historical items, poems, lists of rules, 3, was not adapted to calculations, and fourthly, was not a conventional scheme of writing. Recent research appears to support Garcilaso's claims, believing the binary form of coding the quipu through manipulation of knots and strings suggests it conveys a narrative, which, if true, the quipu would be a semi-psicographic writing, a text not directly representative of spoken language. Additional uses of the quipu theorized are calendars, astrological or divination purposes, and placed inside graves. The quipu is an effective communicative device within its cultural context and shared understanding and consequences. Inca cultural knowledge is integrated with quipu formatting. Quilter and Erden argue pursuing only a model of writing that encodes speech sounds is to disregard the power of structured formatting communication, which is not inferior to encoded speech. The quipu was used for record keeping rather than as a counting device, but the Quichua language had a complete system of numeration. Erton and Brezin completed an analysis of 21 quipu, which illustrated how quipu used for census and tribute data were synthesized, manipulated, and transferred within the Inca administrative system. An example of tribute data collected was labor tax days worked. Understanding the quipu as a narrative system was initially passed over by scholars. Garcilaso was guilty of projecting his own experiences and understanding of language onto the Incas, for example, the convenience of an alphabetic script for writing. However, Garcilaso believed locals did not read short stories and poems from quipus. Rather, knowing these stories and poems enabled them to read the quipu. In this case, Quechua oral tradition is served through associative strategies of cognition. This practice avoids Plato's concerns in the Phaedrus of forgetfulness, for the quipu is not a written record but only a reminder for the oralist. This does not dissuade the effectiveness of the quipu's accounting practices, which surely are not all committed to memory. Quilter and Erton note the knots on the quipu are organized differently on narrative compared to accounting quipus. This leads Quilter and Erton to conclude the Inca did not use a phonological knot alphabet, and Garcilaso's experiences watching Quipu Kamayak read from quipus was an application of his own understanding of language operations. The Naples document discovery contained what became known as a royal quipu of Blas Valera, a hybrid construction quipu which by 1595 evolved into conventional text figures and the Quechua poem known as Sumaknista, or Beautiful Princess. The royal quipu has a basic syllabary of 40 master words representing the full range of syllables in spoken Quechua. As such, it is a link from classical quipu and colonial innovative quipu. Beyersdorf argues Quipu Kamayak and Gwil Kamayak, creators of pictorial art, were modifying quipu to create a phonologic writing system. The royal quipu was a closely guarded secret of the Amoita historians of the Inca Empire, known only to a select few, were self-contained bodies of knowledge that functioned as writing to be read without reference to outside text or memorized narratives. The quipu serves as a reminder that a culture's literary status is not dependent on our notions of communication. Ong argues literate groups categorize items, whereas illiterate groups or oral cultures categorize through situational and associative means because of their inability to think in abstract terms. However, by these definitions, the Incas were a literate group, though the Quipu were actively categorized by Quipu Kumayak while employing logical reasoning. While Quipu Kumayak provided precise meanings in the Quipu, according to Ong, this does not constitute restructuring the human life world as true writing does. I argue the Royal Quipu successfully takes this next step for the Incas, for it creates new standards of accessibility. The educational system in the Incan Empire saw value in developing skilled Quipu Mayaks. Bolter argues old writing entails method, wherein the writer intentionally arranges verbal ideas in a space for later examination by a reader. According to this definition, the Quipu is a form of writing with clear and conscious design and purpose. Although discussing a computer, Engelbart notes it is none of our concern how technology stores information in symbols, so long as the symbol structure portrayed to us are consistent with the forms we think our information is structured. Spain had difficulty understanding and appreciating the Quipu because they did not conceptualize it within their language, or known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, in addition to their system of knowledge storage.